Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. I hope you're all doing swell, and as some of you may know, I competed in the finale or the final round of the British GT Championship, but I wasn't the only one. Now, I'm sure the majority of you know because it was promoted literally everywhere, but Jenson Button was also on that grid in the same team, albeit in a different car, and his teammate was Chris Buncombe and mine was Michael O'Brien. And so effectively for the final round of British GT, all four of us got a lap in qualifying. There's two sessions, an AM qualifying and a pro qualifying. So the slower silver would go in the AM and the quicker silver would go in the pro. And then in Jenson and Chris's case, Chris the AM would go in the AM qualifying and Jenson the pro would go in the pro qualifying. So that is quite a complicated system. I hope I explained it as well as possible. And therefore, me and Jenson did do our laps in a different session. So there's the argument the track could have been slightly different. We're on slightly different fuel loads, but all in all, how often or how many times do you get to compare yourself in qualifying to an F1 World Champion? Not many, so I'm going to do it anyway. So without further ado, let's get into the lap. So you can see we're using the full circuit of Silverstone, the GP layout. So turn 1 cops, we were pretty much identical through here. We had slightly different styles. Jenson did brake a bit harder than me for a smaller amount of time, but he gained it back on the exit, and overall we matched fairly equally through there. And then on the approach to Maggots, Beckett and Chapel, you can see for Maggots on the right, I use a lot more inside curb, so our lines are slightly different through there. The curb is very aggressive, you can hear it as you go over it. It's not something you want to do in a race every lap because I think it would in turn damage the car quite badly. And then for the left, it sets me up a lot nicer so I can go through the left and fourth quite comfortably. Whereas Jenson, I think, struggles a little bit with understeer from missing maybe the curb on the right through Maggots, and for Beckett's he has to drop to third gear, which engages a little bit more engine braking and slows down his minimum speed ever so slightly. But our lines are different through here, we're using different gears. It's kind of hard to say who's gaining and who's losing out overall until you get on the hanger straight, and once we get into the hanger straight, it's clear to see on the data I gained overall about a 1/10.5 through Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. But at Stowe, Jenson seems to struggle a little bit with some rear instability under braking. You can see him snap the wheel, or the steering wheel, as he goes to turn into the corner, so he's clearly not that comfortable with that stability on the rear, but it does mean he doesn't meet the apex of the corner. So through here I gain another 1/10 just from kind of meeting the apex myself. And it's worth saying our brake traces and downshifting was identical through here, so it's kind of clear to see at this point in the lap the two cars are behaving slightly differently. The rear instability under braking was something me and Michael in our car never had throughout the entire weekend. And as we approach Vale, which I think is one of the most underrated corners on the circuit, I really enjoyed it because the braking zone is so heavy. The main difference between me and Jenson here is I brake slightly later and a bit harder, so I go to about 110 bar of brake pressure, whereas Jenson hits 100. But apart from that, it's very similar, to be honest, and overall, throughout the whole section of Vale Club, I gain 800ths, so I think it all came in that braking zone. And as we go on to the new start-finish straight, I'm 800ths better off than I was going into Vale. So another thing to kind of note as well is mental to believe this was Jenson's first ever weekend using a car with ABS. So I know to some of you that may be like, oh, that doesn't really matter, does it? But when you've had a career as long as Jenson's, you know, using F1 cars, Super GT cars, whatever, for that to be his first time using ABS must have been such a weird sensation. And when you look at it, he did a bloody good job considering it was his first ever time using it. And so as we approach the fast right of Abbey, which would be turn 1 on the new circuit, our lines are slightly different going through here. So I take a bit more curb on the inside, and it's only a small amount more, but Jenson gains a bit back on me through the fast left of Farm. So overall in this section, before we brake for Village, I gained about half a 1/10, so really small differences. So before we go on, at this point, I'm about 4.1 tenths up on Jenson. So to be fair, it's quite clear to see that a lot of that time was through Maggots, Beckett, but up until this point, I mean, you wouldn't know it's that much by looking at the onboards. It's such fine margins, and to be fair, when you're driving different cars, it's hard to say what's car, what's driver, you know. So let's carry on with the lap and see where else we're different. So for Village, the right-hander, my track positioning on the approach is slightly more to the left, and it's only a few meters, if that. So it allows me to carry a fraction more speed when we end up turning right, but our brake traces and choices of gear through here are identical. So remarkably though, from that different choice of line, I gained 2/10 carrying a slightly higher minimum speed through the right. And again, you wouldn't notice that when you watch the onboard, but that higher minimum speed was quite detrimental to lap time. And something I've learned this year as well is you can gain a lot more in slow speed corners than high speed corners. So here's me talking about how to gain lap time in a slow speed corner, but what you're about to see is quite the opposite. So for the loop, the left hand hairpin, Jenson brakes a lot harder than me. He reaches 80 bar whilst I'm only managing about 50 bar. This does allow him to rotate the car in a smaller amount of time and get on the power earlier. So overall, he gained, I think, just about over 1/10 of a second in that one corner. So a lot of it was in the exit, and you can see in my steering inputs they're a lot more manic than Jenson's, so I do remember struggling with the rear instability through here. I don't know why, because we didn't have it anywhere else, but in this one corner it was really bad. And you don't want the rear end to be moving around like crazy in a corner like that, because it just delays you getting on the power. So yeah, not ideal, but Jenson did nail it through there. And then down the Wellington straight, I'm paying the price for getting a bad exit in the corner before compared to Jenson, so I will be losing a little bit of time down there. At Brooklands though, I managed to brake about 10 metres later and trail brake into the corner a little bit more, so you can see a difference in line there in the entry phase of the corner. I'm going in a bit tighter, and in that entry to mid-corner phase I gain about 1/10 of a second on Jenson, but on the exit we use the same gears, he gets on the power pretty much at the same time as me, so on the exit we're fine. I do remember Jenson and Chris Bunkum, his teammates, saying they were struggling with the braking of the car all weekend. That was kind of where they were losing time or where they didn't feel comfortable. It does make sense when you look back at the lap. So for Stowe, for Brooklands and those heavy braking zones, they were really struggling, and you couldn't really, in their eyes, you couldn't really trail brake to the same extent me and Michael could. But anyway, moving on to Luffield. In between Brooklands and Luffield, Jenson does go up to 3rd gear, whereas I leave it in 2nd. I do remember him saying in one of the debriefs that he likes the downshift for Luffield because it allows the engine braking of the car to slow down the car a bit more without actually braking himself. So again, you can see, because he's not liking that braking in the car, he's trying to slow the car down in other ways. So I do have a slightly tighter line through Luffield, whereas Jenson essentially V's off the corner, so he goes out wide, turns the car quite abruptly and then gets on the power quite early, so he gets a really good exit. But overall we matched each other through Luffield, albeit having very different approaches, and I think that's quite a key thing all year I've seen, comparing myself to Michael, to Chris and Jenson. All have slightly different styles, but as long as you're making your style work, it's not really the end of the world. And then finally, the run to the finish line, I do get a cheeky toe from the Ferrari GTC car in front, but, and I'm not even shitting you, I got absolutely squat diddly from that slipstream. And I saw the Ferrari in front, I was like, right, here we go, I'm going to get half a tenth, maybe a tenth. But I got nothing, so yeah, not ideal. I think I just lost a bit of time through Luffield really, but overall I did a 1 minute 58.78 and then Jenson did a 1 minute 59.41. So on the face of it you may think, wow, 6 tenths, I'm faster than an F1 World Champion by 6 tenths, I'm amazing, wow, I'm so fast. But no, I mean, there's so many variables there that work against Jenson. His first time ever using ABS, his first time ever in that car in a GT3. Me and Michael have been driving the car all year. The cars themselves, they're the same car, but they can differ in terms of just the way they're made slightly and little bits here and there. So there's so many things working against him. 6 tenths on the face of it is actually not that much. And I'm sure there's bits of the lap where he goes, there's clearly a tenth there, etc. And that goes, to be honest, the same for me. I look at my lap and think, if I did a slightly better job, say in the hairpin, or in a few other corners, we would have been slightly higher up the grid, and maybe we would have won the race. So it's not perfect from me either. But that is the end of the video, so I hope you enjoyed this analysis of the laps. If you want to see something more like this, I could do me and Michael O'Brien's laps together earlier in the season. I could do F1 eSports laps. You know, give me a shout. Tell me in the comments below. If you really liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to stick around for more content like this, then do indeed sub to the channel. But I appreciate you watching the video, and I guess I'll see you all on the next one.